Hello and welcome to week 5 of this video tutorial series for virtualracingschool.com with the global Mazda MX-5 Cup car, and this week once again sees us return to Summit Point Raceway for the second of 3 visits this season. This time around though we're running the very small but extremely challenging Jefferson course instead of the larger main circuit. Despite its length, nailing a good lap here is very tough and demands excellent car control to quickly navigate its succession of very tight corners with awkward undulations. As usual, to match the official series, I am running in default weather with the iRacing baseline setup. My preparation for this lap was reflective of the challenge the circuit offers, as on my second lap I was just over 1 second off ultimate pace, but it took me another hour or so to find those last few tenths which are critical around here. So we'll play the lap through first before then going into further analysis from the approach to the final corner. And across the line there, that was a 54.412, and you saw what I mean about the car control required, the sideways moment through the last corner, and it's because I kind of arrested the slide before it got too bad that I was still able to carry the speed and finish off what was a pretty good lap. Yeah, so if we take it back to the end of my out lap, so the most important thing here is just to be nice and gentle with the car, not push too hard at all, because you can run off onto the grass before you've even started your lap. But what you do want to do is run right to the outside of the circuit, and this ensures or helps you get the fastest possible exit. So you've sacrificed some of your entry lap time there, because it doesn't matter, it's an out lap, to get the best possible exit. So I'm got a really nice shallow exit or tight line on the exit, and I'm on the throttle really nice and early. So accelerating hard, gradually bringing the car over to the left up into 4th gear, and then we're going to break down into 2nd gear for this first of this tricky sequence, which begins with a right-hander. So obviously the braking point for this corner is quite important, but there is pretty much no reference at all. So depending on your field of view, I guess, if you look at if you have this in your peripheral, the start of this wall on the left, so pretty much just as that comes out of your vision, I guess that would be one reference that you could use. It very much depends on your field of view though. The way that I am doing it basically is just I'm looking at the apex and my subconscious is telling me when to brake. So I've obviously done many laps up until this point, and I've experimented with braking too late, too early, and your brain will kind of know when you're roughly in the same position. So if you find yourself braking a bit too late most of the time, the most important thing is to get to a consistent level, and then you can just either pull it back or move it forwards a bit. So yeah, we're braking fairly hard, we're heel and toeing on the downshift, that's why my brake pressure isn't quite constant there, it just fluctuates as I blip. Down into second gear, fairly normal entry, I would say, not too late, not too early. The most important thing really is to not try and carry too much speed in, and notice how typically well, it varies. Sometimes you get understeer into here, sometimes you get oversteer into here. This time I had a little bit of understeer, which is why I'm just holding onto that brake pedal just to trail the brakes into the corner, which helps the car to rotate. So that's really nice at the apex. You don't want to use too much of this curb, but you can just run along the side of it, which is what I'm doing here. And you want to straighten the wheel up as early as you can and get onto full power as early as you can, which then leads into this tricky sort of S sequence. So you're up into third before the left-hander. Now, as you go along this left-hander, you want to kind of just feather the throttle, and the reason for that is because the fastest line through here is to use this curb. So it's pretty much tarmac, but it's profiled like a curb. So if we just have a look at that, so the car does crest and get a little bit light. So you got to just feather the throttle as you do that, otherwise you'll get some oversteer. Now I do actually have some oversteer right now, which we can just about see. So that's why not only was so that steering there, that would normally be too early for my entry for the next right-hander. So that was actually counter-steering some exit oversteer, which you can see from the chase camera there. But then as soon as the rear end of the car compressed once again, I had lots of grip, which you'll see. The car loads up, lots of grip, and immediately the car repositioned itself suddenly to the right. So you got to just be careful with that, because the car can bounce a little bit as it lands off here. So you can be catching some oversteer on the exit, and then the front end can bite again, and it can send you over here somewhere. So you just got to be aware of that, and that's why I recommend feathering through that section. So briefly back up to full throttle now. Now you want a very, very similar approach to the next right-hander, just a bigger lift this time. So you can't afford to take as much speed through this one. So I'm actually breathing on the brake pedal as well, and again we're fully onto the curb. And just be aware that this has a tendency once again to unsettle the balance of the car. So again, this requires good car control. You need to be have good awareness for the balance of the car and whether or not you need to counter steer to catch any oversteer. So again, the car lands back to full throttle very, very briefly, before then a very short braking zone. Now if we just play that through again, off the throttle on the brakes, full throttle as the car settles, and then immediately we're on the brakes. Now car positioning is going to be pretty much the middle of the circuit as we exit so this sequence here is actually turn 2, which then leads to turn 3. So we exit turn 2 in the middle of the circuit before then braking for the very, very long left-hander of turn 3, and then eventually 4 on the exit. Now I was just a tiny bit too early on the brakes this time, and we'll see what that does. Just means I turn in a bit too tight at the apex there, and I have to run over that curb just a bit more than I would be comfortable with doing so. So if we just have a look at that again, so braking quite briefly, just slowing the car down enough in second gear again, and so here I'm too tight, I would say, slightly too tight versus what would be optimal. You want to be really nice and close to this curb, but ideally not running over it. And you'll see what happens here. As I do touch it, I have to lift out of the throttle again and then wait for the car to land before I can commit to full throttle. So we just play that for you. So lift, on curb, car lands, full throttle. And then obviously we're off throttle because we're upshifting into third. And then on the exit, basically you want to be trying to keep the car as tight as possible fully over to the left, running the left hand side of the track, and then as the circuit opens out here on the exit, that's the point where you want to just open the steering gradually and let the car gradually run out towards the downhill left of 5. So I'm running a fairly straight line from this point, so this is the exit of 4, where I'm not fully over at the edge of the circuit, just to the right of middle, and then I'm pretty much taking a direct straight line to the outermost part of the circuit as I downshift for 4. So downshifting for 4 is going to commence, or braking rather, and downshifting is going to commence just as the corner becomes visible over the crest. So obviously we can't see the corner at the moment. Now it's come into view, and then it's about a second or so after that, I would say, that you want to be braking for the left-hander. Now this corner is all about the exit, so don't worry too much if you overslow the car on the entry. That's okay, as long as you get on the power as early as you possibly can for the fastest possible exit. What you don't want to be doing though is being on the throttle too early and then having to lift before you've reached the end of the corner. So we'll just see that on the brakes, heel and toe down, shifting into 3rd, just trailing the brakes. Now I've got the car where I want it to be, nice and tight, and this is a curb that you definitely want to avoid, this curb on the inside, because what that will do, if you hit that, it'll unsettle the balance of the car and you'll lose a lot of momentum as the car kind of bounces as it comes off it. So you want to get close to that, which I have done, but you want to avoid actually making contact with it. So that was quite nice, and I was able to get to full throttle just after apexing there. So I did actually play with the throttle just before the apex, because I was a little bit worried that the car was turning in a bit too much, and then I had a slightest of confidence lifts just there, but the reality is I probably could have committed to full throttle, but even so, it's much better to keep the car within the confines of the circuit on the exit and not to drop a wheel onto the grass onto the exit there. So allowing the car to run all the way up to the edge of the circuit, and then you basically you're approaching the final sequence now, keeping the car in a nice straight line. There's like an S section here which is flat out, or at least the first part is flat out. You've got this curb on the right which you want to get nice and close to, but again, don't make contact with it. That's about as close as you want to be, otherwise it unsettles the car as you head into the braking zone for what is turns 6 and 7. This is where I get a bit of oversteer, which we'll explain in just a minute. So you want to start braking in between these two curbs. So you get this curb on the right, and then you're approaching this curb on the left. You want to be braking roughly in between these two. So on the brakes now, down into 3rd gear, down into 2nd gear. Now, so when you brake here, you're braking, I guess, as you cross over the central lines as well, but you want to be aiming as you brake for this curb on the inside. Now the act of braking will pretty much start to push you slightly wide, but because you're kind of turning whilst braking, this is likely to induce some oversteer as you get off this curb. So I'm just off the curb now, and because I'm continuing to trail brake, downshifting into 2nd, only now am I off the brakes, but notice how that trail braking, holding the brake pedal there, because it's so easy to not slow the car down enough and to run wide, to run off into the grass here, not be able to bring the car back. The quickest line through here is actually to not really let the car go too much wider than the middle of the circuit. So you can allow the car to get to about here. So I'd say leave a car's width to the outside of the circuit at least. I'm a little bit tighter this time, and that's partly due to the oversteer that I induce. So the oversteer gets induced because I'm turning in now whilst continuing to trail brake. So this is quite serious oversteer at this point, and I do two things to deal with that. So obviously the first thing is quite obvious, I'm counter steering quite a lot, and the other thing is I've got back on the throttle, but I'm not getting to full throttle. If I was to get to full throttle right now, that would make the oversteer worse. What I want to do is just take the load off the front tyres once again. So I'm just going to about half throttle there, and that in combination with coming off the brake and counter steering gets rid of that oversteer. So the oversteer is now gone, the car is now neutral once again. So I'm just squeezing on the brake pedal once again just to make sure that I don't push too wide, and now I'm trying to commit to full throttle as early as possible for a nice good exit. Now I take 2 attempts there, I go for it there, that's too early, and then I go for it there and I commit at that point, and I just have a slight bit of oversteer again as I do get to full throttle, but it's dealt with fairly easily with some counter steer. Letting the car run all the way to the edge of the circuit because you want to use all of the track you have available for the fastest possible exit and the earliest that you can possibly be on throttle. And you'll likely always get a pit lane entry message as you run through this area of the circuit. Don't worry about that, it's not going to give you a penalty as long as you keep within the confines of the circuit across the start finish line. Okay, that finishes up our lap. So you can find all setups, replays and telemetry for your own use and analysis on virtualracingschool.com, where you can also book one-to-one tuition with top drivers from the likes of Coanda Simsport. Good luck for this week, and feel free to post any questions or comments below. Thanks for watching.